Just on to substantive matters then. Our first speaker of the day on this session is Nto Mapumulo. Nto will be looking at the local landscape for both insurers and the insured in the wake of recent major events that we all lived through, some more acutely than others, including COVID-19, the July 2021 unrest, recent floods in Natal, and also fires that have raged throughout the country. Nto is a senior associate in our insurance and personal injury section, and he has a keen interest in all these fields of practice. He's written extensively about it and has also appeared on radio and various other platforms to discuss matters relevant to these topics, so he has certainly no discomfort in presenting to all of you today. Nto, we look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you, Peter, and a very good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this year's episode of our Crema. Okay, so the topic for discussion, as it has been introduced, security is a priority and not an option. So we look at the outlook of insurance landscape post the storm. And it's going to be clear as we move or progress with our discussion as to what the storm is and what it entails in relation to the insurance industry. So I thought it would be, before we get to our discussion or the key points for discussion, it would be interesting to look at some of interesting facts of recent months and years in relation to the insurance industry. The first one being that of the recent floods in the Natal. So to date, those floods record as the deadliest that we've ever seen. And this is important because it's going to be clear as we discuss the different events relating to the insurance industry as to the effects of those in the insurance industry, and going forward what we need to look out for, particularly in the relevant policies or insurance policies. Then the second interesting fact is that of fraudulent and dishonest claims. So 4,287 claims of fraudulent claims were detected in the year 2021, worth 787.6 million. So those figures are quite shocking, because this is not an every year occurrence in the insurance industry. Then lastly, which I think also, an interesting statistic which I think is also very pertinent, is that of homeowners insurance policies. The 48% of complaints that were received by the Ombudsman for the short-term insurance, 48% of those related to the homeowners insurance policies. And this is very important because some of the contributing events is things such as load shedding. And it's going to be very interesting as we progress with our discussion to see how that got to that 48%. And briefly, just to look at the points that we will briefly touch on. The first part is going to relate to the recent major events, as well as the related insurance policies, and also the takeouts from those events as to what we need to look to into in our insurance policies going forward. Then also the last part of the discussion is going to also then be the current and future threats or risks that threaten the insurance industry. Okay, so the recent past major events, the first one, or the major one really, is COVID-19. And to date, we are still dealing with the effects of COVID-19. And lately, there have been reports of growth in cases there, but hopefully we're not going to see those devastating waves as we saw earlier last year and a year before last. So with COVID-19, we saw a rise in business interruptions claims. So most of those claims, they ended up getting to our courts, and there was a very vigorous litigation that stemmed out of this throughout the world. And South Africa was not spared this kind of litigation, and it has in our jurisprudence really kind of gave us more in terms of that area of insurance law, because previously there were not so many cases that really related to business interruptions. So most businesses, those that could not successfully claim in this regard, were those that were, as much as they had policies for business interruptions, the interruptions, their policies did not provide for the interruptions that stem from contagious infections and viruses. So it's very important that when you take out the insurance policy for business interruptions, you look specifically at the risks from which the interruption flows from. For an example, we saw, and it's going to be clear as we discuss fires here. So in Cape Town, there were so many businesses that could not claim for the business interruption because as much as they were covered or they had insurance cover for business interruptions, they did not have those. The interruption had to relate to fires, but they were not covered for that. So it's very important to have a comprehensive list of risks that you are covered for business interruptions. And also during this period, COVID-19, we saw a rise in life and health policies being triggered. So, and that relates now to, and also to those states that we discussed. So during this period, there were many fraudulent and dishonest claims that were lodged, and the studies and the reports have now revealed that the majority of those related to COVID-19. Then the second major event is that of 2021 July unrest. So during this period, for your business to have been able to successfully claim for insurance policies, the short-term policy that your business has, it had to make an extension to Caesarea cover. So when you take out cover, it does not necessarily cover you for things such as political unrest, civil unrest. There has to be a specific extension to Caesarea cover. And it is very important that we instruct our insurers or our intermediaries to specifically include that cover in our short-term policies, because should anything such as the July unrest recur in the near future, you will not be able to claim successfully in that instance. And also one of the policies that were triggered mostly during this period related to life policies, because some of you may recall that during this period there were over 300 deaths that were reported, and that is when also we saw the rise with the fraudulent and dishonest claims relating to the long-term policies. So we need, it's very important, I think, for this particular event, it's very important that we look specifically for the Caesarea extension in our policies. And it doesn't come at a big price. I mean, they usually rate for each item between 2 to 4 rands for that extension to be included. Then to move on to the next event, it's that of 2021-2022 fires. So we've had these unexplained weird fires throughout the country in the past few months. For an example, there were Cape Town fires. There were, the China Mall in Durban was burnt down. We had even the parliament in Cape Town was burnt down, though that one, it later transpired that building was never insured to start with. So, it's important when it comes to these kinds of these events. Well, the most prominent, obviously, policies for this purpose, would be for the fire insurance. It's going to be your business interruptions, your loss of income. What we saw in China Mall is also there were so many personal injury claims stemming from the burning down of that building. So those associated policies, you need to look into those. And also look for things such as structural damages. It's very important because I would like to just pause a bit in that, in relation to that kind of policy being the structural damage, because most people, when it came to the flash floods in KZN, they could not claim successfully, or they could partially claim for structural damages, because the insurers, they raised a defense where they would argue that some of the damage is pre-existing, and that was not, it was either not reported in the annual reviews and annual assessments. So it's very important that for every structure that you've got an insurance cover for, you repair any pre-existing damages. You also ensure that you report that to your intermediary, being your brokers, so that should there be any event that's going to force you to lodge a claim, the insurer cannot raise the pre-existing damage defense. Then to move over to the April 2022 KZN floods, as we saw in our interesting statistics, these record as the deadliest ever that we've experienced. So your policies, such as your flash floods policies, your rain and hail policies, they come really handy when these kinds of things happen. And it's going to be clear also as we move to the risks that threaten our industry at this stage, as to why it is important to look very closely at those kinds of policies, look at the specific exclusions, because most of the short-term insurance policies, they specifically exclude things such as floods, your earthquakes, and these catastrophic events. So it's quite important that we, if we want cover for those, it's very important that we communicate that to our brokers, to our insurers as well. And also during this period, what we saw is there were so many missing dead bodies, and it became very important or very relevant for the beneficiaries of the long-term insurance policies, as well as and also for the families to know if they can claim for long-term insurance policies. So those were some of the recent past major events, as well as the pertinent policies. So to move over to the second part of our discussion, it's the risks that threaten our insurance industry. The first one, okay, they are not listed in any particular order, so do not now believe we've got an imminent political instability in the country. The first one relates to the political climate. Due to the political system that we have in our country, where we've got one party dominant political system, so our political climate is different to some of the northern countries, the northern African countries, where political instabilities would be wars and intense political instabilities, like your DRCs, your Sierra Leones, etc. Here, because of our political system, we find a situation where the fictions or the factions of a dominant party, they tend to, the effects of those fictions, they tend to spill over to the other industries. And so our insurance industry is not spared from those. And a classic example of this is the 2021 July unrest, which have a very close link to the political climate of a dominant party. So it's important, it goes to what we discussed earlier on, to say we need to look out and have that SESRAP extension cover in our policies. Then we also need to also look at the cybercrime. So cybercrime is increasingly becoming a serious threat for all our businesses, and we've seen some major incidents in this regard, being, for an example, your Durban port, where there was a massive cyber attack late last year, where the operations of that port had to come to a standstill completely for a prolonged period, and that had significant financial implications. So we need to look at policies such as loss of data policies. We need to look at the cyber crime policies, and we also need to look at well, some of the consequences that may stem from those, in the sense that in a business, you've got some contractual obligations to the other businesses. And when you are cyber attacked, you may find yourself in a situation where you are unable to deliver timeously and in accordance with those contractual obligations. Then the load shedding. Load shedding is one event that is going, or rather a risk that is where there is no end in sight. So we need to have, and we saw as part of our interesting stats where we saw 48% of the complaints dealt with by the Ombudsman's office related to homeowners' insurance policies. And this is unprecedented in the sense that homeowners' policies, the insurers are usually inclined to pay out for those. And this has now completely changed because there are so many of these claims. So it's important that we look particularly at our home and house contents policies, look for the conditions and the exclusions in those policies. And the last one is now the global warming. There have been the warnings, there have been educational talks around this topic, but the effects are now being felt more than ever before, where we've seen with the floods, where we've seen a few days ago in Nigeria, they've suffered also massive floods. So we need to look out for policies that speak to catastrophic events, particularly for those people who are in the agricultural sector and farming, etc. They need to look at your crop and agricultural policies, your marine cargo policies, business interruptions, etc. So, because of time, I will have to stop here, and I'm very happy to engage you guys further should you have any questions, comments, and everything else. Thank you.
Thank you, Mtua, for that presentation. I just have one question. There's a judgment out of the Cape Town High Court. It's a Cafe Chameleon judgment. So the judgment there basically gave a wide approach to the business interruption provision in policies, and essentially said it should be extended, and if there is a crisis or a catastrophe, there should be some. So they basically applied the causation test to basically widen or extend the business interruption provision. And in that judgment, basically, that company, basically, the court said that the insurance company was liable to indemnify them, regardless of the fact that COVID-19 did not fall under the specific criteria of business interruption, etc., etc. So what impact does that have on insurance policies, and how does it impact the whole insurance business industry?
Thank you. Before COVID-19, there was no COVID-19. So what that means is policies could not specifically have COVID-19 provisions in the policies. But then now, post-COVID, there are specific exclusions in most of those policies where they specifically exclude COVID-19. But if you are insured for business interruption, you can still take out cover that covers you for any contagious virus or infection that may still come up. And therefore, you need to make sure when you take out that kind of a policy, the definition of that provision is wide enough to cover you for any foreseeable and possibly unforeseeable virus or infection that may still come in the future.
Thanks, Mito. I just wanted to find out, just tying back to that question of extending the definition of what would be a covered event. Doesn't that go against the whole essence of having insurance as an insurer, that you're trying to limit what you're covering? I mean, if you're going to have courts that extend what is not provided for, in agreements. How does that impact on the industry going forward?
Thank you. Thank you. So it is not unusual for the courts to expand on the insurance policies throughout the world, and that is why most jurisdictions across the globe, people or businesses were able to claim for business interruption claims for COVID-19. And you've got to remember with the insurance policies, there is an element of good faith, there is an element of fairness. So you've got a business that have been paying huge premiums for a very long time with no claims. Suddenly there's this unforeseeable risk that has come up. You are now trying to avoid making payment and leaving that business in a very destitute or rather unfortunate position. So it goes with fairness and all those kinds of elements.
Thanks, Mto. Thanks, everyone.